Easter Diaries by Nick Warburton, a lockdown drama production for the Wildbrooks churches. By permission of Radius, Religious Drama Society of Great Britain.
A man should come to the temple once in his lifetime, come to Jerusalem and stand in the courts of the temple at the heart of his nation. A man should stand there and contemplate God in his life. We all came down from the north travelling together. At first it was just Jesus and his followers, the ones he chose, the ones who'd been with him in Galilee, and were all in good heart. Then, the further south we came, the more folk joined us, walking along with us, and all in good heart. When we came in at the city gates, we were singing. Everyone was singing. It's Passover, so the city's crowded. The outer courts of the temple thronged with people, but the mood's changed. Not singing now, but argument, fierce argument, and the temple officials watching it all, standing in the colonnades and watching. Everything is volatile. A leader, a true leader, could make something of that. A word can become a spark, and a spark can fire an uprising. I waited, but no word came. There was nothing. So I left him with his arguments and went further into the temple, to the inner courts. And the further in you go, the quieter it gets. And the closer to God you are, you're away from the thick of the crowd. You don't go there to argue. You go to kneel and to think about where you're kneeling. You make offerings to God in awe. You consider what God's done for you and what he asks of you. So I knelt to pray, and when I stood up, I knew what I had to do. After dusk, I went to find those watchers, the temple guards. I said to them, "Listen to me. My name is Judas Iscariot. I can give the chief priests what they're looking for. You have to listen to me."
We're far from home. These days, we're always far from home. So we had to find a place where we could share the Passover meal. And we did. We found a room somewhere in the city. There was a staircase at the side of the house, leading to a simple room with plain walls, a curtain hanging at the door, a single window along one wall. You could see a square of blue evening through it, and some early stars. Everything was prepared and ready. The low table with mats around it, the oil lamp already lit, the unleavened bread, cups for the wine, and dishes for the herbs. There was the soft smell of the oil, the sharpness of the herbs. And there were voices in the street, passers-by talking quietly, but as it got darker, only the sounds in the room. And they were quiet enough. We kept our voices low because this was the Passover, and we were remembering, each one of us, what that meant. Our people saved from slavery, the bitterness of slavery, the salt of tears, and how death passes over us and we are not harmed. But there was something different about it all this time. A feeling that an angel of death was close by, yes, but not passing over. This time, waiting, staying for us. A sense that everything was about to change. I looked at Jesus because he would know what we were feeling and show us what we had to do. We all stopped to listen to him. He waited a moment, and then he spoke. "This is how it must begin," he said. I thought it would be momentous, that something momentous was about to happen. But it didn't. It was an ordinary, homely thing. He picked up a bowl of water from the corner, and he took a towel, and, like a servant, he knelt to wash my feet.
When we'd finished the Passover meal, it was late and we were all tired. We left the city and took the track down the slope into the Kidron Valley. We were climbing up the other side of the valley on the Mount of Olives when Jesus stopped. There was an orchard there, and he said he was going to pray. "Wait here," he said to us, "and watch." You couldn't see his face for shadow, but you could tell something was wrong. Wrong beyond any explanation. But all he said was that he must pray, and that we must wait and watch. He moved some distance off and knelt and put his hands on a boulder, and you could see his hands grip the rock. He was only a shape in the dark, but you could see that he was fixed on some sort of pain, on getting through it. Watch, he told us. But watch for what? We didn't know. I looked down the slope towards Jerusalem, and there was nothing to see, just the dark shape of trees and a few small lights in the city. Then I thought, no, it wasn't just watch that he told us. It was watch and pray. So I said to myself the prayer he taught us, to our Father God in heaven. But my eyes closed and the words came to a stop. I had to start again. Then I looked up and Jesus was standing there, and time had moved on, but I don't know by how much. "That's all I asked you to do," he said. "Watch and pray. Can you not do that?" So I watched again, the same landscape, hardly a breeze and nothing much moving, and I tried to say the same words again and get to the end without falling asleep. Then I did see something. A dark mass moving in the valley, coming quietly up the slope towards us. Men coming towards us. But I didn't know why they were there. I held my breath as they got nearer and hoped they were coming to bring help.
He was sent to me by the Roman, and the message was clear enough. This is one of yours. You do something about him. And I could do something. I could take the skin off his back and have him thrown out on the street. I needn't even see him. But for form's sake, I tell them to bring the man before me. They're mad, these would-be leaders. They think God's on their side. So I make them take a long walk down a marble chamber, from the shadows at the far end, all the way into the light of my presence. And they're dazzled. I watch them all the way. Then they're made to kneel at my feet. How much of a leader do they feel after that? Now look up, look into my face, and tell me your plans to lead my people. They cannot bear my light. They cannot look me in the eye. I'd burn them away. But this one, he looked back at me. He simply looked at me. He has powers, they say. They all talk about what he's done. So, tell me, I said to him, all these things you're supposed to have done, tell me. He said nothing. He looked back at me. Show me what the crowds come to see. Do something. Do something. Who are you? I am Herod Antipas. I hold your life in my hand. I hold all your lives. Without that power, you are nothing. His answer was silence. I had him flogged and sent back to Pilate, dressed in the cloak of a king, and they led him away back to the shadows. When he'd gone, the chamber was flooded with silence. I kept looking at the shadows as if he were still there.
When I was a girl, a woman in our village was stoned to death. She wasn't much more than a girl herself, and she was slight and timid. Everyone ran out into the street shouting her name and calling for her to be killed. And I remember thinking, she looks so harmless, and yet she's a sinner. Everyone says she's a sinner, everyone, so she must be. They can all see what I can't, that she's evil in the sight of God. And they all ran out to watch her killed. I couldn't go with them. Whatever she'd done, I couldn't watch. I thought of that girl today when my son was arrested. I couldn't piece together what was going on, where he was, or what was happening. Someone said he'd been taken by the temple guard. I said, why? On what charge? But no one knew what was happening, or what any of it meant. So I went into the streets to find out. And I was shaking. My hands and legs were shaking because I didn't know what was happening to my son, and because I was afraid to find out. When he was a child, I held him and I felt the same fear, that there was something out in the world waiting to harm him. And it was as if that thing was closing on us and running through the streets, as if I was going to see it at last. Eventually a crowd came pushing by, Romans and prisoners and the usual crowd shouting and spitting. And I saw him, my son, bowed under a great beam of wood and driven on like an animal. And everyone was shouting like they did back then when the girl was killed and I turned away. Only this time I couldn't turn away. He's my son. I knew I had to follow.
One of the neighbours came to tell me. She said, "They've taken your brother, the Romans. I thought you'd want to know." She took pleasure in that, I know she did. "This time it'll be crucifixion," she said. I didn't see my brother for nearly a year before yesterday. When he first left, I used to leave food for him. I made extra bread or cakes, without ever really planning to, and then left it where I thought he'd find it. And the food always went, though I never saw him. Then he started taking other things, almost like he wanted me to turn my back on him. So in the end I did. But crucifixion. I knew I had to see him again, for our mother's sake and for his own sake, when he was a boy and everything was still all right. So I went to Golgotha, the worst place I ever saw, the worst thing I ever had to do. 3 crosses they had there, him and 2 other poor fools. I wasn't prepared. It cut me to the heart, the suffering they meant to inflict, the suffering they meant us all to see. And it was like the rest of the world just fell away. There was nothing left except that hillside, and all the agony there ever was there. I felt it would never end. It did, of course. And I thanked God he was dead. Then I cried myself to sleep. And then I dreamed, and it all started again. It was the worst it could ever be, but for 2 things. First, one of the men hanging there with him said something to him. I couldn't hear what, but it was like a drink of water to my brother. The other thing was that he saw me there, and I know he was glad of it. But that's all the comfort there was. There's nothing else, and there's no hope. Because when I'm awake I remember, and when I'm asleep I dream.
I turned round. I was looking at the tomb, and then I turned round. Maybe something made me do that. I can't remember, but when I did turn round, a man was standing there, and I hadn't noticed him before. I thought, I'm on my own here. I don't know who this is. I thought, he's nothing to do with what's going on. He's nothing to do with us. He has no right to be here. My mind was turning everything over, and I was dazed. So I looked away from him. I looked back to the tomb, and it still stood there. It was still there, open and dark, and it was still empty. Still. The rock they used to seal it was still in the wrong place, and if you forced yourself to look in, you could see the cloth was still in there too. The cloth they wound round his body, and that was wrong. Everything was wrong about it. You couldn't believe what you saw, because no one should have taken his body. No one should have done that. He didn't deserve it. To think they'd done that. Someone had come here. Surely in death he'd be allowed some rest. Then I turned back to the man, because it didn't make sense what I was seeing. I couldn't get anything out of it, and maybe I could ask. He was still there. He hadn't moved. So I thought, he is something to do with this. He must be. He works here, and he's moved the body. For some reason I can't work out, or maybe, I don't know, simply because someone told him to. He's moved the body. I said all this to him. "Where is he?" I said. "Can you tell me what you've done with him? Can you tell me what's happened? Please, tell me. Please tell me." And he said, "Mary." He said my name.
Cast: Man in the Temple, Guy Leonard. John, Michael Davey. Peter, Tim Simpson. Herod Antipas, Robert Engelhardt. Mary, Juliet Lester. The Thief's Sister, Anna MacLeod. Mary Magdalene, Emma Barnard. Music was played by Michael Boxford. Concluding with Amberley Wildbrooks by John Ireland.